Hello and welcome to the Tomcast. I'm Tom, president and dictator for life of 515comics.com. I'm making a video today about a review that just was released on a blog about webcomic reviews by my buddy Sam. A long time ago, Sam started doing these webcomic reviews. It's called Webcomic Whimsy. This week, it's Nextuus' turn to be reviewed. That's the comic that I draw and I talk about on this show most of the time. So I was very excited when I got the email because it had been a while since he and I had discussed having Nextuus be reviewed. So I was very excited. I was not having a great day, and I saw that email and I was like, oh sweet, I get to read this review. This is going to be so awesome. And the review did not make me feel very awesome. It is not what I would call a great review. I mean, the review itself I think is well written, and I don't disagree with any of the points that he made, but it didn't really make me feel awesome. So I wanted to make a video to kind of talk about what I think of critique and what I think of improving a comic, especially as someone who has been doing an ongoing webcomic for the past 10 years. What do you do when someone points out something you can make better? How do you respond to that? What do you do with that? This is not going to be like a point-by-point rebuttal. I'm not arguing any of his points. I do think it's a fair review, and I do really appreciate him doing it. And mostly, I just kind of wanted to talk about the idea of criticism in general, because it's something that, and I mentioned this in my email back to Sam, I don't have a lot of criticism for my comic. I've not sought it out. The few times that I have reached out to someone and said, hey, let me know what you think of the comic, I've been really scared to do so, especially if there's someone who actually makes comics or is knowledgeable about comics, because what if they don't like it? It's scary to put yourself out there, and especially because Nextuus is such a personal project for me. I mean, I've been working on it for 10 years, and it's, based on ideas that I had 10 years before starting working on the comic. It's a big part of who I am. So it's pretty scary to ask someone else to take a look at that and pick it apart and see if they can find things that could be improved. That's really scary, because what if they do? And in this case, they did. Walking away from reading the review and just taking a little bit of time to think about it, I've realized that it's very, very important to have criticism. I will never say that I'm a great comic artist. I will never say that I'm a great storyteller, but I want to be a storyteller. I want to make a comic that people enjoy reading, and I want to make a comic that can effectively convey a story that's interesting and that people want to read. That's a clear goal that I've always had, and so criticism like what I got from this review helps me to make my story better. There's styles that I've chosen that have just kind of become ubiquitous with the story, and I think it would be jarring to change them at this point so far in. But there are things that I can change, and that's what I'm going to look for. That's what I'm going to take from this. Try to find the best ways that I can improve my comic as it is. That was one thing in the review that I kind of, as I was reading it, I kept wanting to say, well, I can't change that now, Sam. Well, I can't change that now. That's a good point, but I can't change that now. But instead of having that reaction, what I want to take away from it is this. This is it. So, for this review, Sam asked, give me a point to start. I'm going to read it for a couple hours, and then I'm going to stop, and that's what I'm going to do my review on. I suggested starting at Chapter 8, because it starts with kind of an action scene, and some interesting stuff happens in the chapters that follow that. I didn't know how far he would get, but he read 2 chapters. He read Chapter 8, Chapter 9, and he did an intensive review of those 2 chapters. What I want to be able to do is say, okay, I had this review done, and he pointed out some things that I think that I could change in the comic moving forward that would not be so jarring, that would just make the comic better. I'm going to do that moving forward, so that if someday there's a second review of Nextuus, or someone else does a review of Nextuus, if they read the later chapters where I am now moving forward, they would not be able to make those same criticisms. And this is something that I think makes reviewing webcomics very difficult, or I would imagine would make reviewing webcomics very difficult, is that something I've always liked about webcomics is that you see a process. So my first pages are not going to be as nice as my latest pages. Things like pacing, dialogue, character development, art, all will improve as the story progresses, simply because I'm not a professional when I start. You're reading through a progression of my storytelling ability, as well as reading a story. So some of the things that from the review that I want to try and improve based on what he said, actually have a synopsis, probably on the About page. That would make the most sense, is to just have a synopsis there. So that's something that I'd really like to do. Other things that I want to do, I want to, and I've started doing this some, not to defend myself too much, but I've started doing this some, is trying to put more dialogue on the same panel when it makes more sense to do that. Why have 2 panels when you can get it all done with 1? Why have 3 panels when you could get it all done with 1? I'm trying to be a little more efficient about that. And doesn't always work, doesn't always happen, because I kind of make up the layouts for the pages on the fly, and that's part of where the space issues come from. And that's the other thing, is space. I want to utilize space better. I am trying to do that, and I feel like I've gotten better over time, but there's still probably pages that would just drive Sam nuts from current and recent chapters if he read those. So those are some things that I would really like to try and improve. Again, I feel like every bit of criticism, and I've not gotten much, but every bit of criticism that I've gotten as I have worked on this comic, I've tried to take to heart. And even if I don't think it applies to me, I try and at least take something from it of like, okay, how can, if I don't want to do what they suggest, how can I still make what I'm doing better so that someone like that, who thinks that my comic should be a different way, would at least not be as bothered by it. So, anyway, I guess that's going to be it. There's going to be a bunch of links down below to some of Sam's other reviews, his webcomic, and just things that I think that you guys should check out. Of course, there's always links down below to my comic, so if you haven't read it, you sure can. And again, I'm really thankful for this critique and for these notes, and I'm going to put them to use, and I'm going to try and make my comic the best I can moving forward. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Thanks as always for watching, and you guys keep your stick on the ice.